not only leaves us out of touch from our target audiences, but also prevents us from understanding the nuance of the modern system that has created the monstrosity of animal agriculture. This is why inside the United States, less than 10% of the population identifies as vegetarian, and less than 2% identifies as vegan. And more importantly, why a majority of self-identified vegetarians, when polled, admit to eating meat products in the last week before the poll.
Huh?
Yes, and so we can have awareness. Gallup has polled that and has asked, are you vegetarian? People who say yes will in the majority respond to, yes, I have had meat either in the last week or in the last day. Odd definition of vegetarian, but there we go. So where do we go from here? I argue that the question of eco-ableism is key because it lets us completely imagine our relationship to each other, and more importantly, an understanding of what it means to be human. And it lets our fields come to see themselves in radically altered and different lights that make, and with the ability to make connections that were previously unthinkable. As an example, it is perhaps not too revolutionary anymore to claim that human existence is in many ways determined and negotiated through constant contact with non-humans, or the legacies of non-human influence. The existence of trail paths for humans to follow, pave and build roads on, clearings and wildernesses for settlements, or the massive influences of pollination and distribution of agriculture, or the ability for the land to withstand modern intensive agriculture, all depend on a prior history, often centuries long, of non-human influence. This influence is not merely historical, it also plays itself out on a regular way, on the way that humans currently settle, thrive, or interact on a daily basis, in both the smallest and largest of ways. Timothy Mitchell summarizes this best in his book, Rule of Experts, where he tells the history of dam building in modern Egypt under the hands of British colonizers, and makes an incredibly convincing argument that the dam building was just as responsive to the influences of the Anopheles gambia mosquito as it was to the demands and needs of the British. He summarizes, and deserves to be quoted at length here, saying, quote, "It is not a matter of acknowledging non-human forces that worked against human expertise or created obstacles to technical progress. Expertise did not confront such resistance externally after it was already complete, nor did the power of capital. Plans, intentions, and so forth were created in the combination with these other elements. What is called nature moves like the plasmodium in and out of human forms, or occurs as arrangements that are social as well as natural, technical, and material. The world out of which modern technopolitics emerged was an unresolved and prior combination of reason, force, imagination, and resources. Ideas and technology did not perceive this mixture as pure forms of thought brought to bear upon the messy world of reality. They emerged from the mixture and were manufactured in the processes themselves. Resolving these processes into reason versus force, intelligence versus nature, or the imagined versus the real misapprehends the complexity. But this misapprehension was necessary, for it was exactly how the production of techno-power proceeded, overlooking the mixed way things happened, indeed producing the effect of a neatly separated realm between reason and the real world, and the human and the non-human, was how power was coming to work in the 20th century in general. Social science, by relating particular events to a universal reason and by treating human agency as given, mimics this form of power. The normal methods of analysis end up reproducing this kind of power, taken in by the effect it generates. Social science helps to format a world resolved into this binary order, and thus to constitute and solidify the experience of agency and expertise. In much of social science, this is quite deliberate. It tries to acquire the kind of intellectual mastery of social processes that dams seem to offer over rivers. It is less important whether one understands how things work, more important how effective are the immediate results. But more careful forms of historical or cultural analysis can do the same thing in less obvious ways, by leaving techniques unexamined or talking about the social construction of things that are clearly more than social. To put in question these distinctions and assumptions about agency and history that they make possible does not mean introducing a limitless number of actors and networks, all of which are somehow of equal significance and power. Rather, it means making this issue of power and agency a question instead of an answer known in advance. It means acknowledging something of the unresolvable tension, the inseparable mixture, the impossible multiplicity out of which intention and expertise must emerge, requires acknowledging that human agency, like capital, is a technical body, something made. I could go on, the quote goes on for a bit more, but I think I'm using enough time for the quote. In other words, the idea of what it means to be human and the processes that were previously thought to be human-only experiences in the most individual sense are in fact open and shifting in their nature. And our own understanding of what it means to be human is defined in the context of the non-human influence over us. This goes beyond just our, and I use that term loosely, understanding of history and ourselves, but also reaches to what is considered what is monumental, worth paying attention to. The human clear-cutting of forests in the northeast of North America becomes a historical event, something worth understanding and processing for future knowledge, while the bison doing the same thing to the midwestern portion of the continent is viewed as a natural occurrence, a happenstance, worth studying only in the most objective or procedural senses. To continue this allegory further, when human or non-human direct influences overlap, the human influence is always prioritized over the non-human, to the point of the obliteration of non-human influences. The historiography of the desertification of the Sahara points to this most starkly, where human influence is taken as a given, but the voracious appetites and agency of non-human herbivores is omitted almost totally from writings on the subject, except as a result of human agricultural influences and controls. This doesn't just result in a profoundly flawed way of understanding the world around us and the historical and natural processes that have helped shape the world, but also what it means fundamentally to be human and alive. Part of this failed understanding, and this is where I think eco-ableism becomes key, comes to the influence of the non-humans who live inside each and every human. Over the past 50 years, medical science has come to a profound realization about the makeup and internal life of the human body. What was originally seen as a somewhat sterile, or at least distinctly human, is now understood as a human body is now understood as a living place for trillions of bacteria cells, known colloquially as gut flora, who actually outnumber the distinctly human cells, that is, cells which contain human DNA that is passed down through human reproduction, by an order of magnitude. In the words of Dr. Duane Savage, writing a literature review in 1977 and barely concealing the shock tone that underlies the rest of the work, quote, "The normal human organism can be said to be composed of over 10 to the 14th power cells, of which only 10% are animal cells," end quote. Modern estimates actually say that it might be closer to 1%. This doesn't just force us as critical thinkers to completely rethink the way that humans are constructed, but as a concept, but also forces us to change the way that we understand and comprehend the human body and biological structures. Spurred on by the recent U.S. Institute of Health's Human Microbiome Project, a number of studies have started to delve deeply into how the microbiome affects human health and vice versa. The results have not just been surprising, but far-reaching. For example, researchers at the University College of Cork have found in a series of experiments testing in part on non-human mammals that both happiness and depression have direct causal ties with the presence of certain species of gut flora. In their own words, one of the most crucial discoveries that they made was, quote, "Gut organisms can alter brain chemistry and behavior." These findings highlight the important role that gut bacteria play in bidirectional communication between the gut and the gut-brain axis, end quote. In other words, nerve function inside the human body relies on non-human influence to make it work. These findings highlight the important role that gut bacteria play in the bidirectional, Taking this a step further, Sven Petersson of Karolinska Institute in Sweden actually went as far as suppressing the growth of certain strains of bacteria in young mice and seeing the results of this suppression, as well as testing what happened when certain strains of bacteria were later introduced into these mice. The results, again, are somewhat startling because they showed that juvenile brain development changed depending on which flora were inside the body. In Peterson's own words, the colonization of gut microbiota has become integrated into the programming of brain development. I go on, but I'm running out of time. I'll summarize this next section really quickly. Anne McCartney at the University of Reading has, in perhaps the most direct crossover here, been doing studies on the role of gut flora in the development of autism inside the human body, and has found that inside autistic subjects, there is a 90% of autistic subjects have a mass difference in gut flora and have mass problems in resulting through digestion due to the difference in gut flora inside autistic bodies. And she suggests that part and parcel of a variety of other concomitant problems that autistics deal with on a day-to-day level. I'm going off script here, so excuse me if I'm a bit quick about this, is that